name is Chris Storm. I have been at Safe Haven Humane Society for 16 years, and I'm the executive director. So when I started at Safe Haven Humane Society, we were a really small organization. And so one of the first programs that I put into place was our youth program. So we started what we call Pets and Pals Club, and that's where youth could come in once a month, and we would do crafts, art. They would play with the animals, and then we would teach them something about the environment or the animals, that sort of thing. So we started our humane education program back then. From there, we have grown over the last 16 years. We were doing about 380 adoptions a year when I started back 16 years ago. We are now over 2,600 adoptions out of this facility every year. We're a full adoption, no-kill shelter, and what that means is an animal can stay here as long as it needs to. We are a little different than a lot of shelters. We don't euthanize for anything except for if there's aggression that kind of a team of us have decided this really is aggression, not just I don't want you to pet me today type of thing, or a vet has told us that the animal has to be euthanized. We don't euthanize kittens that walk through the door. We don't euthanize. We have a trio of 3 dogs out there, 10-year-old dogs. One of them has cancer, but his quality of life is still really good, so we're trying to find a hospice care for him. One of them needs a wheelchair. We've got them in therapy for back legs, are not real mobile, so they go once a week to the vet for hydrotherapy, and we're working to try and find a wheelchair for them.
Can you show him your face? Come on, you can do it. Huh? You're being a good girl.
We try and stay full. My goal is if I have an empty kennel, that means there's a cat or a dog dying in another shelter. So we work really hard to keep our kennels as full as possible, and sometimes that includes looking outside our area, sometimes that includes looking outside our state. Oregon has a really good outcome for most of the animals that hit their shelters. So we work with others. We get animals from Maui, Hawaii. They fly them into us. Oklahoma is a big one. They fly in. Oklahoma has about a 99% euthanasia rate on every animal that hits one of their county facilities. So we work with a lady down there to help get animals from the shelters down there up here for adoption. We work with New Mexico. They have a really high euthanasia rate. We work with in Oregon, of course, with any shelter that needs help or any person that needs help. But we, like I said, we try and keep our kennels as full as possible. Adopting a shelter animal, there is nothing more special than that. When I first started at Safe Haven, I really wanted a mini Aussie. I grew up in Eastern Oregon. I grew up in the Pendleton area. Lots of healers and Australian Shepherds in my life. And I really wanted one of the mini Aussies. And they were about $2,000 to buy from a breeder at the time. And I just I'm not gonna do that. I work in a shelter. But they were really hard to come by in a shelter too. And so one day I told my staff, I'm like, no matter what happens today, we cannot take another dog in. We are full, so we're gonna have to push it out to the weekend, do something. And I got a phone call about 3:30 in the afternoon from my front office, and they said, Chris, you need to come. There's a gentleman here and he will not leave. And I said, well, what's going on? Well, he has a dog to release to us. And I said, okay, I'm headed over. So I go over and he's sitting in a chair and he's just glaring at me, and he's just and I said, hi sir, how can I help you? And he tells me that he needs to release his dog today. And I said, the problem is I just don't have a kennel today. And it was a Friday, and I said, but I will have one by Monday morning, because if our adoptions are good over the weekend, then I'll have a kennel to be able to put your dog in. And he's like, no, I have to do it today. Kind of gruff gentleman. And I said, well, what kind of dog do you have? And he said, well, I have a mini Aussie. And I said, well, if you really have a mini Aussie, because in my head I was like, it's a mini Aussie lab, Rottweiler, cross of some sort. And he goes, no, it's a mini Aussie. And so I said, do you have the dog with you? And he went out to the car and he brought in this little 1-year-old dog, and it immediately jumped into my arms. And it was everything I ever wanted in a little mini Aussie. And I said, well, guess what? You don't need a kennel because it's going to go home with me. So I always tell people, and that was the best dog. And the story, what I always tell people is about judging too, because that day I was like, this gentleman, he's just really, he was really gruff. He really, it had to happen. And I couldn't quite understand it. But I called him 2 weeks later, and I called him and I said, I just want to thank you because this is the best dog ever. And I said, but I just really want to ask why. Why did you release your dog to, had to happen? And the gentleman said that the dog's name was Scooter, and I left it Scooter because he knew his name. But he said Scooter and him went down to Mexico, and that's how he got his name. Was he rode in the scooter on the bike, so on the little sidecar, all the way to Mexico, and he was treated for cancer down in Mexico on the beaches or with a doctor down there. And when he got back to the States, the doctors here had said that it didn't work and that they had given him less than 3 months to live. And that was the day that he came in. I still cry. That was the day that he came in because he wanted his best friend somewhere. So I got Scooter for 12 years. He passed away about 9 months ago. But I always tell people that you can find him. And they'll have a story that goes with them. We have a purebred 10-week-old beagle coming up from California that somebody had just purchased from a breeder, and they decided they weren't ready for a puppy and gave it up to a shelter down there. So why adopt? Well, number one, for the most part, out of a lot of shelters, you are saving a life. When we fly dogs in from Fetch Fido Flight out of Oklahoma, those dogs didn't have a chance. When you are adopting those dogs, you literally have saved their life. Check your shelters first, check your rescues, see what's there, and look at personalities and see how that might help. Because a lot of times you will find them in a shelter. It may take you a little bit, but you will find them. Every day is an adventure around here. You never know from the time you open until the time you go home what your story is going to be for that day. But at the same time, it's always an adventure.